Welcome to Plugged In, a podcast presented by OREMC about our co-op, our community, and our shared connections. I'm Michelle Hutchins, Member Communications and Marketing at ORAMC, and today we are talking about supply chain issues. Supply chain delays and deliveries have been something we've been talking about for the last 2 years since this pandemic got going. Initially, it was toilet paper and paper products. Then we heard about the great wing escapades in that chicken wings were hard to come by and restaurants were charging higher prices. Even just at this past Thanksgiving, back in September, October, they were talking about the great shortage of turkeys that could happen. It didn't materialize, thankfully, but it's just a part of the ongoing saga. Not to mention the flotilla of ships that still are sitting out in the Pacific waiting to come to dock, to be unloaded, put on trucks, and begin moving east. And the big issue in most of these instances is a labor issue, and labor shortages are definitely causing issues with some of the critical inventory items that we at OREMC and other electric utilities across the country depend on to keep your lights on. So to help me explain a little bit better about what is going on, joining me is our OREMC Operations Manager, Travis Page. How you doing, Trev?
Doing good. This is a new event for me, but we'll get through it.
That's all right. We'll take it one question at a time, but We're going to jump right in.
All right.
And is ORAMC being impacted by supply chain issues?
The answer to that is absolutely yes. We have multiple areas that we have been affected by the inventory shortage, if you will. I don't want to over impact this thing, but we call it supply chain critical inventory.
Yeah.
Yes, critical inventory.
You want to maybe let's kind of explain what we mean by critical inventory. What are those critical items that we're talking about?
We first noticed that we was having trouble getting some wire back during early summer of 21. Had some wire that we normally order, purchase, get the next 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. The delivery time on this got pushed out to 4 to 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. As the summer unfolded, basically, we started noticing that there was several different types of material. A lot of the material was basically underground. It's underground supplies, underground transformers, underground connections. That wire I spoke of was actually underground wire.
Yeah, if I do think I remember the job that was for. It was about May.
Yes.
And we had a project we were doing over off Oak Road Island.
Exactly.
Causeway. And I remember we were supposed to be in, out, and moved on so that the county could come in and do what they wanted to do.
Yes.
But that wire then got, I don't know, it was about a week later than expected.
Yes.
And that was one of our first, as you said, one of the first instances where there was a bit of a delay, but then our purchasing coordinator, Michael Hickox, noticed other things were getting delayed. So things that he might expect in 2 or 3 days were taking a week or two or even more.
Yes. When we started noticing that back during the summer, Okefenokee, the staff, basically, some of the people like the accounting group, the purchasing agent that we talked about, Michael, our warehouse folks, our engineering department, and the construction operations, my side of it, we compiled and got a committee together, basically, and we started looking at the different parts and pieces that we were having trouble getting. We started trying to look at delivery times, reassuring what we had in our inventory, in our warehouses, and on our yards. We started looking at things like the need. We are in a building frenzy right now, if you will, Southeast Georgia, North Florida, and really the whole United States is in a building boom.
Yeah, much of the southern tier is.
Yes. So with that being said, the demand for these parts and pieces with this critical inventory, if you will, the demand was higher, and we were seeing those order times getting pushed out further and further on different items.
Now, if I recall, it wasn't really a bam moment, if you will. It's not like suddenly it was making headline news. In fact, this really has not made headline news, if you will. But
That's correct.
I mean, we've heard about construction delays with windows and appliances and the cost of lumber, but it hasn't become a mainstream point of conversation to say, hey, the electric utilities can't lay wire because they don't have it. And that's kind of an extreme example. But you talk about the critical inventory, and you said it was tied mostly to underground. So generally speaking, when we're delivering power to a home or a business, we're either doing overhead, which is poles and wires,
Yes.
what everybody can see, and then what you can't see, which is underground, using what we call a pad mount transformer.
That's correct.
And some of the critical components that make that all work together.
Yes.
And that's really at the heart of our supply chain issues at the moment.
It is, and some of that, most of that is based on and escalated, if you will, due to the labor crisis that we have. It's not necessarily a raw material where we can't get the factories and the production facilities can't get steel or rubber or the components to make up these things. It's basically just not being able to have the people in the factories to build these transformers or build these elbows or connectors that we need for the things that we do every day.
Well, I think Michael told me just in casual conversation one day, and I don't remember if it's up in Tennessee. I think it was in Tennessee. One of the vendors that we use for transformers had just built a brand new
Yes.
production facility, and it's not even online because they cannot get the staff to work at it.
Exactly. It's not a material raw goods type crisis. It's a people crisis.
People crisis. Interesting. So it was later in the summer, like you said, when kind of you pulled together with engineering and your group in operations, warehouse, accounting, to kind of really get a handle on what are the issues, what are we hearing from certain vendors about delivery times, and I know that it's been very uncertain too. I mean, on one hand, I think it is a bucket truck that we expect at the end of last year we've yet to get. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then if we want to order one going forward, I think you've told me we've got to put the order in today for something we don't need for 2 or 3 years from now. From Michael, was that a vendor might tell him 6 weeks, which would take us to the end of the year, but then the end of the year shows up and he's like, it's another 8 weeks. And it's not just one vendor. Michael has multiple vendors that he's trying to work from. So we're trying to work on, who are we getting from which vendor, when, and at what frequency, because I think you've also said that we are getting some supplies. We're not getting transformers at this point, but we are getting some supplies. But because this is an industry-wide issue, as production ramps up, they're then rationing everything.
That is exactly right.
So if we order 200, we might get 50 so that every other utility can get their share of the pie. Is that
exactly?
Correct?
And the thought behind that process was that that keeps the bigger utilities from going in and placing blanket orders for hundreds of them to cover their bets, if you will, overstocking, so that the smaller EMCs or the smaller entities,
municipals,
gets left in the dark. I mean, they literally get left in the dark.
Yeah, we don't want a repeat of the toilet paper shortage.
There you go, and that's what it was. So from the get go, from the start, the people who we buy from, our vendors, pretty well told us we're going to get X amount in, and we're going to ration those too. Based on usage and stuff, and past usage, and as they come in, everybody will get their order, but it's just going to be at a trickle.
Yeah.
At a trickle.
Well, I think one of the key points that we need to make today as we continue in on this conversation is that our current consumer members, and we have about 38,000 of them, are our top priority. So as we were dealing with this back in the summer and continue to manage it, one of the key things that is important to share with our consumer members is those that are already on our lines are our top priority.
Exactly.
You know.
With this material crisis like we have, we've actually went in and did a 4-year average of how many transformers that we use on a given year based on maintenance, whether it's storms or just deterioration, decay on equipment that we have out there in the field. We have a good idea of how many transformers we go through in a given year with our existing customers. And we certainly don't want a customer's transformer to blow up at home or, get hit by lightning or hit by a car or something, and us not have the material on hand back in the warehouse or back on the yard to restore power to them. So we've kind of set aside somewhere in the neighborhood of a year's worth of stock. And
that's what I like to call our SOS.
Yeah.
Our strategic OREMC stockpile.
Exactly. But we're using that stockpile for outages and even some new services so that we don't have to get into any of our orders that are trickling in kind of in that mindset. But yes, top priority is our customers we have now. I'm not saying that new customers are going to be thrown away by any means. We're wanting to take care of them, and so far we have. Our plans are to continue using the resources we have and doing just like the vendors are doing us. We're kind of rationing them out. We're on an individual customer that comes in, just a normal day-to-day residential's got a piece of property he's wanting to move on and build a house or move a trailer in. We're waiting until they get everything ready, all the permits, all the fees is paid, that their equipment's up. We're waiting till they are absolutely ready to have power, and then we build them. In the past, somebody may come in and put in an application, and it would be convenient for us to just run out and build it time we get the job order. But we're being a little bit more strategic about how we're going about stuff like that.
Well, and I think that gets back to what you said a bit ago. Once we kind of, again, it wasn't a bam moment. It was, hey, this is what's going on, and we need to figure out how to manage it. And, really took that time that even though, the traditional annual inventory reconciliation had already occurred, it's my understanding y'all went back and counted everything again. So that it was clear that what's on paper, what's accounted for is what we have. And that that's when you developed the SOS. Okay. So based on a 4-year average, we have the year's worth of supplies for maintenance and maintaining and storm and outage response.
Yeah.
Then the next pile, if you will, is sort of our construction and system upgrades, because yes, there's new services and there's existing services, but we're also, because of this building boom, because of the increase of homes and businesses coming onto our lines, we have to kind of grow with it or upgrade with that as well. So we've got a major tie line project happening on Highway 82. I'm sure many of our consumers traveling between Brantley County and Glynn County have seen that work. And now we've started one down in Florida on Route 1. So there's supplies that obviously are needed to see those projects through that you already knew about, and either we already had or were slated for coming, correct?
Yes.
And then part 3 of that would be what was in the pipeline. At the time, we identified that things were tightening up, if you will, in terms of free flowing of full orders. What did our engineering department already know about in terms of new service requests? And then from there, it's what's left over, so to speak. And then what gets added, what comes in, what goes out, and what's available on any given day. And that's the part that's fluid.
Yes. It's a continuation of, or a continual just checking the status of where you're at and what we have as far as new jobs coming in and work plan jobs, these tie lines that you spoke of, constantly staying on top of that and constantly revisiting the facts, the new facts, whatever the changing facts with the vendors. Have these dates been pushed out even further on orders? Are we still pretty sure of what we have and when we can get it? We talked about just a minute ago about the individual customer coming in. One thing that we have done as well, and this is on the engineering side, our design team, if you will, our stakers, they are working with our developers. Back in the past years, we would somebody comes in and they want to develop a subdivision, and let's say it's got 100 lots on it. They would sit down with our team, with our designers, and we would lay out this and go build this whole subdivision basically out, the backbone of this subdivision, if you will. We'd put our whole infrastructure in, and we would set all those transformers. Now, because we really don't have an excess of the transformers or the connectors that go on the transformers and things like that, we've backed up and we went into an even more level, detail level with those developers. We try to work with them and let's develop certain areas in this subdivision. Like, if there's 100 lots there, let's build the first 10. That lets the developer start doing what he's wanting to do, develop lots, build houses, and sell them. But it doesn't put a pinch on us as far as using a vast amount of inventory and material, and it doesn't hold him up either. Then as they fill up the first 10 or 12 lots or first 20 lots, whatever that may be, then we move on to a second piece. That seems to be working good for us, and it seems to be working okay for the developers as well.
Well, it gives everybody a chance to have continuous forward motion.
Sure.
Now, one of the things you talked about a little bit in terms of helping to ramp up supply on the yard, if you will, is harvesting, for lack of a better word, existing inventory that's just been idle in the field. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'll try to explain that. We have, like you mentioned before, 38,000 customers. Over the years, customers have come in. They've built establishments, whatever you want to say. We've got transformers and inventory that's in the field on our system that may not be used. We went back and currently they're inactive accounts.
Gotcha.
Set out there. They're idle accounts. Most of these that we're looking at have been idle for some period of time, years, a couple of years. Well, that inventory can be used for customers in a situation where maintenance has happened, their transformers burn out. We could take those transformers that are in the field and use them just like a transformer that's coming from a vendor.
Gotcha.
So it's been a conscious effort for us to scour our system, scour our records, scour our inactive list, if you will, find the best transformers that are ready to be brought back in.
I gotcha.
Not all of our inactive transformers can we just go get, because some of them's going to be moved back into they could become active.
Gotcha.
But we found the best ones that have been idle for a long period of time. We're making an effort now to have the teams go out, the construction crews go out and bring these transformers back into our yard. What little bit of maintenance, if any, we'll check them out, make sure they're ready, and they're set on the yard, ready to go out to serve another customer another day.
To be turned over as needed. So it just is kind of added to what we've already accounted for and stockpiled, if you will, but it's just that added cushion.
That is correct. And
so while our supply chain issues are certainly an issue, particularly for new construction, and our construction projects. I think you and I were talking the other day that with the 82 project, there was something we were waiting for the next phase of build that hadn't quite come in. So you explained to me that, well, that's okay. We just kind of shift gears and we just go back and do a different part of the
part of the job.
The different part of the job, which has to happen anyway. It just might be done. You might have done it one way, but you're trying to maximize time and continued forward progress.
Yes.
So it all kind of works out. But the key point to take away is we are not in a situation where we're concerned about not being able to maintain our system, not being able to respond to outages. Yes, we're past hurricane season, if you will, but as we know well, we can get some strong winter storms, strong spring storms as things, but we're prepared for that. We're prepared to respond as we need to. And taking care of our current member consumers is that top priority. And so while there are supply chain issues, we've been able to mitigate that problem in the sense that we have what we need and we're confident in our ability to respond. Because certainly, as you've alluded to, we're not the only utility dealing with this problem.
No, it's like I say, it's pretty well a nationwide thing.
And in some ways, from what you've said, or I've heard Michael say, is we are significantly better off than some.
Yes, well, there's some EMCs that are have basically scaled back to the point where if you get a new service, it's going to be an overhead service only. They do not have the underground material to build an underground service.
Now, let's just address that a little bit, because we've alluded to underground versus overhead. And I mean, years ago, the only option was overhead when, poles and wires. I mean, is one better than the other, or is it simply a matter of aesthetics?
It's a lot to do with a matter of aesthetics. People in town, they like the trees and the landscaping and all of that, and a pole sitting in a yard can be kind of undesirable for some folks. But as far as one being better than the other, no, there's really no difference. And that basically it also is kind of an ace in the hole for us. If we was to get in a situation where underground is not available, we have tons and tons of overhead material. To our surprise, our overhead transformer order is going to be here in March, which is earlier than usual. We actually, when we get overhead transformer orders, we usually have them shipped to us in 3 different piles throughout the year. Mm-hmm. But we was notified back a couple of weeks ago that we're going to get all of our overhead transformers that we ordered in March. So, yeah, it may not be aesthetically pleasing, if you will, but when you turn the light switch on, overhead power is just as good as underground.
Yeah, well, and I think that speaks to the supply and demand. I mean, the demand is for, and a lot of this conversation is truly related to residential.
Yes.
I mean, so the underground aesthetic we know is a preferred method, but at the end of the day, power is power, and what you're telling me is building new services or fixing services, we haven't got a problem because there's always the overhead option, even if it has to be a short-term option for some until the other supplies come in and we can do a change out if that's what is everyone wants to do, intends to do, or was planned for initially.
Exactly.
So, well, Travis, thank you for sitting down and chatting with me about this a little bit more. I think the key thing we really just want to tell our members is, we've got you covered, and we're more than ready to welcome new members as well. It just might be at a little bit longer timeline than it would have been, say, a year or so ago, because of the labor shortages driving longer lead times in terms of delivery, and also that demand is much higher for new construction. So you've got more competition for those services.
I think you're spot on. The biggest thing I would like to, tell the customers is, we do have the inventory to keep the lights burning. New construction, it's going to be at its own pace, but we're here to keep the lights on. That is our current customers is number one.
All right. Well, for this edition of Plugged In, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.